Thank you for joining our coffee talk today. My name is John Kane, and I look after the pre-sales team for TIS in the Americas. Even in December of 2023, we find that the post-pandemic workplace continues to evolve. In that workplace, a lot of companies continue to experiment with hybrid work arrangements to optimize team performance. Surveys indicate a preference, at least among managers, for in-office work. While this seems like a pretty strong inclination for financial institutions and large tech companies especially, it's easy to imagine that some degree of remote work may remain part of most companies' retention strategies. But having said that, on-site presence seems to increasingly become a criterion for job recruitment. In the Treasury domain, remote management, operational execution, and cloud-based workflow may suggest that the role of the central office is gradually transforming into solely a physical hub for team meetings. But to discuss this, today we've gathered a panel of Treasury professionals who will talk about their experiences with hybrid work models, and our discussion today will center on whether the era of the nomadic treasurer has arrived. So let's welcome our guests who will each have their unique perspectives. Connie, why don't we start with you?
Sure. My name is Connie Miner. I'm the treasurer at News Corp. I've been with the company for about 3.5 years. I manage a team of 3, and it's the corporate treasury function here in our New York City office. We have a very decentralized treasury operation in this company with various treasury professionals throughout the world that do not have a direct reporting line to me. Prior to News Corp, I started my 16-year career all in treasury in manufacturing, then went to a consumer products company and was last at fashion, and now I'm in media.
Great, thanks, Connie. TR, we go to you.
Sure. My name is TR Wooster. I've been in treasury since 1999, mostly with high tech. I've worked for some of the largest companies here in the Valley. I also took a slight detour into higher ed, which was eye-opening, to say the least. And I've worked with Hitachi Vantara for the last 8 years now. Hitachi Vantara is a large subsidiary of Hitachi Limited. Hitachi Limited is very decentralized. Each one of its subsidiaries gets to essentially act independently. And within Hitachi Vantara, I manage a team of 3 inside the overall treasury organization, which numbers 8, located in the US and the UK.
Great, thanks, TR. And last but not least, Ernie.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. My name is Ernie Humphrey. I am the CEO of 360 Thought Leadership. I was a longtime treasury manager. Back in the day, we used to manage people all across the globe many years ago, so I've been nomadic for a while, I would say. In my current role, I do a lot of webinars and thought leadership around treasury, subject matter expert on all things treasury. Relevance here is I've worked remotely for 10 or 15 years. I've managed people across every time zone in the world for a long time, and I've had a front row seat as I talk to hundreds of treasurers, APAR professionals, and I've really gotten to get a sense of what they've been going through, and I've done a lot of research, my surveys about what's going on in the remote work environment. So thank you for having me today.
Great, thank you, Ernie. Excited to get into the topics here today. I think it's going to be a good conversation. Let's start off here with a little bit of background and work experience. And Connie, I'm going to come back to you to kick us off. Can you tell us a little bit about your work environment, how you've managed maybe a hybrid environment, and the general strategy towards the future of remote work?
Sure. So I started with News Corp in April of 2020. So I actually interviewed for the job in the offices, was told that this is not a remote friendly company, and then COVID happened. So we were fully remote until September of 2021. And at that point, we came back 2 times a week, and you can come in whenever you want, which, as it turned out, was, there's some people that just really, really liked the remote. And so they were happy to come in on Mondays and Fridays when barely anyone was here. So there just wasn't consistency with, who was coming in and when they were coming in. But in September of 2022, we went to 3 times a week, specifically Tuesday through Thursday. And at that time, and since then, the company has really done a lot to engage employees and to get them to want to come back in. This being, the center of the company, it's a news organization, and from its beginnings, the management team was used to seeing people huddled together on the news floor, working together on stories, and so the expectation is that that's happening here throughout the organization. And so, I personally have found it to be a good balance of being in the office 3 times a week with my team, which, by the way, everyone on the team has been here less than a year. So, having that collaboration is, I think, really essential, especially for new employees, and getting them engaged into the organization, and doing activities to build the camaraderie within our own team and other teams. We actually we're in New York City, so we get together on a quarterly basis with other finance teams and do something fun, go to happy hour, go to a sports event. And so that's like a finance specific activity. The company has there was a holiday party yesterday for everybody. They do, maybe more like semi-annual events or pop-up events, but for everyone in the building, we'll get together once a month to acknowledge birthdays, and we do lunch and learns within the finance team where we have someone from one of our businesses come and speak about an interesting topic, what they're doing, strategy, whatever it may be, which is really engaging within the business. So I think this multi-layered approach to engage employees and remind them why we're here, and it's not just, okay, everybody in the office and we're all just going to look at each other's faces. There's a lot of interaction, and it really is it's from, I'd say, our management team putting in the effort to do so.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of effort, and but yeah, for those new employees, those employees that have been there for less than a year, I can imagine it's so important for them to build those relationships internally, to be able to do their job effectively. Yeah, that makes sense. How about focusing in on Treasury in particular? Any aspect of your the Treasury operation that you find challenging in a hybrid or remote work situation?
To be honest, not really. It really is more of the training. So sitting next to someone, we have somebody that just graduated college in May. He's wonderful. He's professional. He's a smart guy, but he just hasn't done this work before. So, there you can share a screen, or you can share a meeting room and sit next to each other, and it could happen either way. I think sitting next to each other really facilitates it easier, the training aspect. And I think it was easier during the Great Resignation for people to leave jobs and move to other jobs if they felt like they weren't engaged in part of the culture of the company. And there's at least here at News Corp, I mean, the company has a very deep culture, and all of our businesses have their own identities, really. And so there's a lot to be said about making connections and communications in person to be able to kind of carry through all of the work that we need to do. So in terms of actual Treasury operations, all of it is really, for us, is through our Treasury management system, through bank portals, through Excel, through meetings with others, which can be remote, can be in person, but I think the work can be done. It's the team engagement, camaraderie, and kind of happiness and cohesion of the group that really gets built in the office.
That makes sense. Maybe the technology can only take you so far. You still need that relationship element to it. That really stands out in your story there. No, thank you, TR. Let's sort of ask a similar question to you here in terms of some background on your environment. Again, how you've managed any sort of hybrid or in-office type aspects to it, and then any challenges you found maybe around Treasury processes, but also maybe managing things like initiatives, projects, maybe an implementation process as well?
Sure. So our environment is a little different from Connie's. First of all, I would also call it a hybrid environment, but it's the type of hybrid environment where management hasn't taken that step to mandate a return to work on specific days. So instead, what they've said is that the return to work is function specific, and so the leaders of each functions can make the decisions that they need to make regarding that. And within finance, our CFO has decided that it's up to the managers to decide what works best for their environment. We're distributed around the world. We're in, office locations, shared service centers, as well as, some people were already remote before the pandemic. And so within Treasury, we've decided do what you want to do, basically. And everyone decided to essentially be remote as often as possible. I live in San Jose. I'm 45 minutes away from the office. I go in once a month usually, sometimes twice a month. And that corresponds to when my manager is in town. She doesn't live here. She lives in Southern California, right? And so when she comes up into town, that's a good time to get the entire meeting together, our entire team together in the office. So at least, we can all meet together. With that being kind of company-wide, there's not always people in the office. Sometimes there's other meetings going on, and I also go in the office when other functions tend to be in there, and there's people around to meet. But we have to manage a lot of that through remote. I wouldn't necessarily say that's different. One of my employees, is not in Santa Clara, right? And so they're already somewhere else. They were in Orlando. Actually, they just left because they couldn't go into the office and there wasn't people there. Well, there used to be an office there. Everyone left that office, right? So there are kind of engagement issues in terms of, he was the newest employee. He'd been here 2 years. The rest of the team's all been here over 5 years, right? So we knew everyone before the pandemic. We have a kind of very strong team culture already in place. But I'm going to get that issue with whoever I replace him with, because I'm not allowed to replace in my headquarters location that headcount. I can be anywhere else, but we have to be in one of the highest rent districts in the United States. So I can't hire here, right? So it's not necessarily a remote issue for me that engagement that he was, he indicated he was lacking. Now, was it driven by some of this remote things? Obviously, because our company did a headcount reduction. Their, offices aren't the same. They do not look the same at our company now, as opposed to when we came in, right? We don't have the square footage, and that implies that people are going to be in different places. Now, for us, that makes remote an advantage, obviously, right? Especially for Treasury. If I'm getting pushed into a place where I can't have people in my core team, which is my personal preference, is they would be in the area and we could go be face to face, even if it's only maybe less often than Chinese company. We just have to manage a remote environment, and a fully remote environment, because not all of our employees are going to be in the same place, right? Not really that much different, though, than someone sitting in the UK, which 2 of our employees do, right? And having to manage them as well. So, same challenges as we've always had, right? Just for different reasons. As far as you had a second part to your question, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's certain benefits, I think, to the fully remote on implementation, and some of it is I'm on the West Coast, right? So my time zone for great meetings with EMEA and APAC happen to fall within those timeframes when people are either commuting or dropping off their kids or something, of that nature. So being able to expand just the time window when we can have those collaborative meetings, and we have shared service centers in both of those locations, right? So our implementations, when they're, we're doing anything, involve those locations. Being able to have an 8 o'clock meeting rather than a 9 o'clock meeting for us is important, right? It actually matters, right? And 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock being, at least in California, where we have to drop off our kids, right? Because schools are mandated for 8:30, right? So, fully remote is, to me, this is one of the first times I've been on my computer with the video in a long time. I don't take calls on my computer. I take them on the phone. So when you say remote, like, doesn't mean that I'm sitting in my office here doing something. And that flexibility has been important for our implementations, right? Because we did implementations where we were running around doing things. The consultants that we hired in were running around doing things, right? And it was interesting because when you get the people that aren't, I'm sure we've been in meetings, right? We're looking at the screen. We're half listening to the meeting, half doing our emails. That is a really bad scenario for innovation. It half your brain, I don't know. Did you pick the left half of your brain or the right half of the brain to focus on the meeting that needs innovation, right? No, I need the full, I need that full attention. I like it when my employees make meetings that aren't on this, on the computer, that they're walking around doing something else, because you just get that full energy. You need the same energy that you would, if you're facing them face to face. So you have to do things like that to make sure that people aren't trying to multitask when you need them not to multitask. I don't know, I kind of went off on a tangent there, but
it's important. Yeah, the temptation to fire off a couple emails, zone out for a few minutes during a meeting, and do that is strong, I'm sure, for all of us. But it sounds like you really benefited from having a leg up time-wise, having a longer time frame where you were in this model, whereas others were maybe reacting to it because of COVID. And it's good to see that you can have that distributed and sort of remote format already in place and really still retain the humanity of it, the quality of life, etc. So that's a great story. It's sort of two ends of the spectrum there with you guys. So far it's been good to see. Ernie, I'm going to switch over to you here. As a Treasury consultant, right, focused on teaching teams how to maximize performance, across the organization. What sort of trends have you seen in hybrid models, and is there any sort of push-pull dynamic in balancing sort of retention with a demand for on-site presence, as maybe a job requirement or a recruitment criterion?
Obviously, I think a lot of teams were forced to get functional during COVID. So I think that transition was eventually going to happen. I think it was just kind of sped up that way. So what I think happened was a lot of people saw that you could be productive working remotely. So there was this cliche that everyone's not going to do anything and everyone's wired differently. But I think teams were forced to do that. Teams were also forced to invest in technology during COVID. So there's a lot of adoption, especially on AP automation, AR automation, just so they could do business as usual. So I think it was forced, but I think it also, people started to realize we may not have been managing people remotely, but we've been collaborating remotely, right? Let's say you have subsidiaries across the globe. We need to get insurance done. So I think people had to learn how to take their best practices and things they've already done. So I think it was out of necessity. And I think people had to learn to live in that environment, because that's just the way it was. Everybody was remote, so it was kind of forced on them. So there wasn't really much of an option. And then when people started to go back in the office, I think there were thoughts that hadn't been there before. How much do I pay for my office rent, right? How much do people pay for gas? How much more productive are people? And on the retention side, can I get better retention if I can let somebody pick up their kids and drop off their kids. In Indiana, we have 2-hour school delay every day. That doesn't work if you go in the office every day. When I was back in the corporation, we were in the office. No, if it was a no blizzard warning, the CEO would walk around, and if you didn't drive through the snow blizzard, you were in trouble. You'd get in trouble. So, I think that was kind of a mind shift that's going on. As Connie mentioned, and TR as well, I think part of it's tied to your company culture and your business, right? News is news, right? So that's just the essence of who you are and your culture. So I think that makes it a little bit more important. But to me, it's about how people are wired. So that was a long dance around your question. I've seen trends. I've seen companies get on board and look at it from an ROI perspective. And depending on your industry, I think people lose talent when they force people to come in the office all the time, especially younger people. So I think there's a lot of dynamics going on there. This trend is not going away. Just think about it. You want the best of the best talent. Can you work around it remotely, or would you rather have people come in the office? It's a trade-off. But in my mind, you want the best of the best. We always sell software. We want the best of the best. So to me, it's like the value. But that being said, having those face-to-face meetings, as much as possible once a quarter, and making sure people are wired to collaborate.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense, and it sort of ties together some of the themes that we've heard so far, right? I mean, Connie's emphasis on the relationship aspect of it. TR's emphasis on the flexibility and building the culture around that, and to your point, being able to put a good team together is going to require that the adaptability here in terms of figuring out what works for the people on your team. In terms of just working with distributed teams, Connie, I know that the team's in the office for a few days a week, so you are doing that collaborating. But back to you, having said that, there is still time out. There is still, things are still maybe a little bit less, face to face than it used to be. How do you maintain productivity in that environment? On those Mondays and Fridays. Understanding the relationship aspect of it, but how do you sort of keep up the operational tempo of the work itself, and what are maybe some of the pitfalls around that?
I would say communication is key in the office and remote, right? So as long as everybody understands their day-to-day responsibilities, but then also the expectations of, okay, beyond that, we're going to need you to work on project X, Y, and Z, whatever it is, always trying to continuously improve, then we know if the day-to-day is not happening. I mean, it'll be clear in Treasury, obviously, but with, kind of project management, we have check-ins. So we have a straight organization. So each person has one direct report on the team. So the assistant treasurer reports to me, the manager reports to her, and the analyst reports to him. So each of us have a meeting together once a week, and we're checking in, we're checking on status. What do you need to get your job done? What are you facing any challenges? And then we have a team meeting once a month, where any issues that haven't come up in the weekly meetings, so we have it all together as a team at that point. And if there's anything that anyone's facing as a challenge, since everyone's been here less than a year, I definitely have let them know to communicate and let me know if there's anything where they're hitting a wall, because we don't want to have weekly meetings and monthly meetings where everything, the status remains the same. So it's checking in, helping, making sure that your team knows that you're engaged, I think, and wants to help, and acknowledging them, that you want them to be successful, and that you're willing to put in the effort to help them on their journey too. I think really resonates with, at least with my team. And then I'd say, actually, so we have the weekly meetings, we have the monthly meetings, and then we have ad hoc meetings as needed. It's nice to have some in the office when we're here and all get together, but sometimes it's just as good or better to have it when everybody's remote. Everybody's in their workspace. It can be hard to get a meeting room here because everybody's in at the same time and there's limited meeting rooms. You know, if we're standing around at my team's desks, it gets pretty loud in that area. There's a lot of employees, it's open seating. So, you know, with the good comes the challenges. So I think there is a really good benefit where we can all on a Monday or a Friday, you know, especially on a Monday, getting into the week to say, okay, let's set up, what are we working on? Get everybody aligned. On a Friday to kind of check in. So how did the week go? What are we going to start on next week? In a, you know, in your home, in your relaxed environment, I think it's really helpful. But it's you know, keeping track, holding everybody to task, but making sure that everyone knows what they're being held to as well.
That makes sense. It makes sense. And yeah, it's interesting. You're building off of the relationship building. You're sort of keeping those lines of communication open. Yeah, I definitely want to come back on the area of accountability as well here in a moment. But before I do that, TR, you know, whether it's since you're dealing with a mostly remote situation and have been, you know, whether it's sort of day-to-day activities for the team or whether it's a project or an initiative or an implementation, how do you keep everyone on track and on task to sort of keep moving your overall effort forward? And you know, what level of supervision do you see the need for, you know, for your sort of remote and distributed team, and how do you manage that?
Right. So, you know, I'm fortunate that Treasury, even going into the pandemic, we would have a meeting once a week. It was everyone, all 8 of us, including the 2 people in the UK. And so that cadence, we didn't change at all because it's, you know, there's only a certain time window that you have with them that's convenient to both parties. And then since the pandemic started, you know, I have to say our treasurer's like a people person, right? He's over the top people person. Couldn't wait to get back in the office. So we started with this cadence of daily meetings in the US. So all the US employees, no matter where you were, we had a half an hour meeting that would last anywhere between a half an hour and 2 hours, depending on the day. And it's a little bit of a free-for-all, meaning, you know, it can range from, you know, what we're doing, what projects we're on, what's happening strategically at the company, you know, our treasurers, you know, what we're doing to present to the CFO. It's whatever we're doing that day, whatever we're doing that week, right? And it's every day, except for those days where we have the meeting, the one day a week where we have the meeting with the people from the UK, right? We substitute in that meeting. So there's a lot of communication, right? And then, but it's all group communication. So on top of that, I have one-to-ones with my employees. I actually, I have made them bi-weekly, partly because there is a bit of meeting fatigue, meeting with the same people every single day. And you sometimes run out of things to talk to about, right? So my one-to-ones actually shifted a lot from talking about tasks to not talking about tasks, right? The tasks section, what people are doing, it's much less of the meeting than it used to be. Obviously, if we're not talking about that particular thing in our daily treasury call, I'll keep a finger on where it is through that meeting, but it's a lot more personal. It's a lot more taking a temperature on where they are. It's a lot more, you know, around all the kind of non-task related things that are happening, right? So it's really shifted in complexion. So that's you know, it's been good with the fact that we're all essentially all remote, right? You know, we only see each other, you know, once a month, if at most, usually. As far as, you know, projects and things of that nature, it's been fine. I mean, I feel like it's not any different necessarily than it was before on some things, right? I think Treasury benefits from being one of those teams in finance, at least pre-pandemic, where we are very used to having everyone in the same location. And even if you're in a large organization, I used to work for HP. It had a massive treasury organization, right?
Yeah.
When I worked for it. But that treasury organization was in 4 locations, right? And especially even before the pandemic, if you looked at finance overall, right? Finance didn't have that luxury that Treasury did, right? And part of it, being our small team size. So it's the same techniques and management style that was used for remote employees before, right? People who were in different locations. I mean, I had experience before. I had a person in Brazil I managed maybe 15 years ago for 3 years, and every year I put a trip in the budget to go to Brazil or to bring him up to the US, and every year it was the first thing cut from the budget. So I never saw him in person for 3 years. And so, that piece of it is not a new challenge, right? It may be a new challenge for some of the people in Treasury because we've been very fortunate typically to have smaller teams that are all in one location, but it's not a new challenge for finance overall, right? And so you just kind of adopt some of the methodology in running your projects and implementations that your peers in finance have had to use all along. Yeah, at least in the organizations I've been in.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, it's we haven't sort of invented some of these techniques. We're just sort of having to rely on them more, refine them, get better at doing them. Ernie, some of what I was hearing in TR's explanation there was a bit of sort of push-pull or a bit of tension here between different levels of management, right? The people person, boss who comes in and wants to have a lot of meetings, a lot of interaction, dealing with people that maybe you don't get to see very often. When you're coaching teams, how do you help them, or really how do you help the sort of the management of those teams develop their own, sort of work home hybrid type models when you're working with your clients? I think we have you on mute.
Gotta unmute myself since I've never been told that the last 3 years, right? Unmute yourself. No one's heard that in the meeting ever. So I think it's I think it's balance. So I mean, to me, I always try and coach everyone. My philosophy is probably not the best. I know you have to meet face to face. Why are you having this meeting? What are you getting out of this meeting? Why is somebody at this meeting? For me, meeting less is better for me, what I've always found. So, and I've also tried to coach other people how to say no to a meeting tactfully. So if I have something better to do, so I think meeting fatigue happens quite a bit. So I think that's what I stress to folks a lot is be good at having a meeting. Then you have a meeting reputation and people will want to come, they'll want to be engaged. And then, like, I don't want to go as far as some of the big companies, like, they charge people if you invite someone to a meeting that goes against your budget. So that's more of my philosophy. Why? That being said, if you have new employees, it's a little bit different. What I would say is a couple things that Connie said, which I think would be my philosophy on meetings in general is what do we need to be aligned on expectations and what do we need to stay in touch on what you need? And that, to me, that's it. I mean, that's the essence of amazing management. Align on expectations. What do you need to get your job done? And also a lot of that is what challenges do you face? And let's decide whether they're perceived or actual and how do we overcome them? I think people sometimes make things too complicated. That's where I think meetings happen a lot. There's too much, I say keep it simple. And on the remote side, figure out how your people are wired. What are your expectations? What do you need from me? Do you want to meet more than once a week? I'm a big, everyone on this call has had one-on-one stress. every time you have a one-on-one, and it's at some point in your career. So I think that some of those things are just, they're rooted in the company culture. And I say, okay, that's fine. But I would say, let's do what TR's doing and use that for professional development, human skills, soft skills. So that's where I think the value is at. So what I've seen is people remotely, people ask questions more. Why are we doing this? What's the value? And then aligning on expectations, asking people what they need, asking them what challenges they're having, maybe with collaborating with other folks and helping them meet those challenges. So managing your team, let's keep it easy. What are the expectations? What do you need? And get out of their way. So I would put it that way. I don't know. I kind of dance around the question. Maybe I should be a politician, but that's, I try and keep it like that. Keep it simple for folks.
No, understood. Yeah, it's all towards, moving towards getting everybody pointed in the right direction and
Yeah.
enabling them to do what they need to do to get the job done. And in terms of getting the job done, Ernie, I'm going to stick with you for a second here. How do you recommend, when people are thinking through this, how do you recommend, and maybe building teams, how do you recommend your clients, hold their teams accountable for the jobs that they need them to get done?
I think well, there's different levels of accountability in my mind, right? There's personal accountability, there's departmental accountability, and then you go kind of all the way up, to the top metrics. So for me, it's okay, how do we decide for each person, what are your individual metrics of success? So how do we tie your success to the department's success? So I think a lot of times people don't even, if you ask a lot of people, what does Treasury success mean at your company? They can't even tell you. And I've seen that on surveys quite a bit. You have to define success. You have to work with each person. What does success look like for TR? I'm his manager. What are your goals? What are we doing? So that breeds that accountability. They have to have a metric and then tying success together. So our metric is maybe cash conversion cycle or payments timing or DSO. So I'm getting into cash management mode here, right? How do we create joint accountability with AP and AR and others kind of across the organization? So I think that helps. And the other part of it is just people understanding what value they bring to the team and to the organization and making them feel informed on what's going on at the company. So I think once they understand their role, the implications of their success, and maybe things they don't do right, what impact that has on the company and their cohorts, I think that helps breed that accountability as well. And just kind of what Connie said, if people feel like you're vested in their success, I think that accountability comes organically.
Yeah, agreed. Connie, back to you. I mean, it would be, would love your thoughts on that as well, and yourself as well, TR. Connie, we'll go with you first. And any ideas, thoughts on how you hold the folks on your team accountable?
So as Ernie said, I mean, we have goals. We set goals at the beginning of each fiscal year. And so there's the underlying goal is to handle all of the responsibilities of your role. Everyone knows all of the responsibilities that they're meant to handle. So that's the kind of stake in the ground that needs to happen. And then for the goals, making sure that they're tracking. So if we expected goal 1 to be complete by mid-year, and we read, as we're heading towards mid-year, it seems like there's going to be a delay. I want to understand why. Is it out of your hands? Is it, because you're collaborating with another team and they're behind? And how then I help you to push things along? And so, it's helping everybody to stick to their goals and and also, and as we're thinking about the goals, having them think about, okay, as our department, this will help our department. We're going to be more efficient. But then how does our efficiency or, another goal, whatever it may be, affect the rest of the organization? Because we're not making Treasury goals that are going to help the rest of the organization. And so the expectation is we're setting them at the beginning of the year. My boss, the deputy CFO, he's going to expect me to ensure that my team is hitting their goals. And if not, we need to explain why and, if there's any issues. And what we've done to try to to fix them. And if we get to a point, you know, he wouldn't expect that I would get to the end of the year and say, we didn't accomplish these things because of X, Y, and Z without him having heard about it before. Like if it gets to a point where I can't manage it myself and I can't help the team, I'm going to go to him to say, I need some help. I'm going to escalate it. So it's helping the team also to understand escalation points and to be able to, you know, successfully complete our projects.
Makes sense. Makes sense. TR, thoughts on accountability?
Sure. So, I mean, a lot of talk about goals, but for us, our goals are literally just projects, right? Just the way that we do our goals. We don't have, you know, the formal goals around doing your job. So that's interesting because goals become kind of secondary to me, right? I've been in cash management too long that I think, you know, doing your job is like the most important thing, and then the goals are kind of secondary because I like to get paid. So, you know, fortunately, at least in Treasury, a lot of the task-oriented stuff is fairly simple to tell whether it's getting done or not, right? If there's no wires for you to approve that are in the system by the deadline, you know someone didn't do their job, right? Or if there's someone didn't cash position, you know, your main concentration account, you know, in time to meet your deadlines, you know they didn't do their right job. So a lot of our daily activity, it's just kind of embedded into the nature that we have a hard deadline that is not determined by our company, it's determined by, you know, the Fed and whatnot, right? So
Sure.
You know if people are doing their daily job pretty much, you know, instantly, at least that level of activity, right? The hard stuff becomes the stuff that isn't that daily activity, right? The stuff in the middle, the stuff between the daily activity and the goals, because the goals everyone kind of tracks to them because they're going to go up to management, and you need to have a good pulse on exactly where they are, and you know, as Connie alluded to, flag, you know, when things are kind of going off to the side a little bit. But that stuff in the middle is all that stuff that we get thrown that, you know, isn't daily activity, isn't a project. You know, sometimes in management, it's even a problem to know how much your team is getting, right? Because a lot of that stuff comes through email. It's, you know, it's that inquiry or that problem solving that they're doing. It's not done in a day. It doesn't take a month. It's, you know, maybe a week or two to get done. That they're taking on to make sure everything is working smoothly. Sometimes for us, sometimes for our partners in the organization, right? And so having a sense of how that is all going, especially because a lot of that will impact people outside of Treasury, I think is the trick, right? And that's just about communication and knowing that they're, you know, your employees knowing that you're focused on more than just the big name goals, that you're focused on kind of everything that they're doing kind of holistically, right? That you're asking them what's going on with that, or, you know, if I was copied on an email of, you know, I saw this email a couple of weeks ago, I don't remember seeing the resolution, where is it? You know, that's important. So, you know, not that goals aren't important, but Connie talked to that very brilliantly. So I thought I'd hit another.
And let me hop in here real quick. I just want to, I'm taking off, that I won't be too long, John. I think part of goals that I always try and stress is, if people can get them in there, as professional development goals, like what skills do you want to develop? And I think once you're invested in that part of it, then the accountability also comes organically. So what are some skills that we need for the department? Maybe you're going to become the AI person. It's not a hard thing, but how do we get your goals connected to your professional development? And that helps the department and helps them feel engaged.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah. So I'm hearing, you know, the operational aspects of this, the day-to-day versus the longer-term team objectives, the individual career objectives, the need for communication here to kind of make sure everything's getting managed properly on an ongoing basis. Kind of your point about escalating over time to make sure that nothing festers. A lot of this is geared towards maybe sort of the last topic here that we can sort of talk through as a group, but around sort of mitigating risks, right? Risks to the operation, risks to the individual contributors' efforts, et cetera. But also things around distributed or remote workforces. What kind of risks do you guys see in those areas, as well as things like different time zones? I know TR, you had talked about that a little bit, or you touched on that. Things like cybersecurity, business continuity, and even things like employee retention. I mean, how do we sort of think around those type of issues and make sure that everything's sort of moving in the right direction? Connie, maybe I'll start with you to see if you have any thoughts on that.
Sure. So, I mean, we, and again, being having the corporate treasury team here that I'm managing, everybody's a backup for everybody. We have we have really good coverage, I think. So if somebody left, I feel like the rest of us could cover that. If two people left, we'd be really stretched, at the same time. But we could do it, and we would just have to make sure we prioritize, to TR's point, it would be, okay, projects aside, get the day-to-day done, which is really where I was at the beginning of this year. It was myself and a brand new person on my team on January 2nd. So I was just putting out fires where I could. Projects had to be put on hold. But so I personally worked through that, and here I feel like I could manage that. If we lost some of our key treasury personnel, so I'm the global head of treasury for News Corp. The treasury team members throughout the globe don't have a reporting line to me, but if I would say the operations in our different global locations, there's also coverage and there's backup. And I would, be working with the local CFOs to make sure that everything was aligned and we'd get somebody in to cover that. And I think we'd be okay there. But on the more, strategic treasury activities like managing our debt, and if there was any refinancings going on, that would be an area that would be a risk. So that is at News Corp, we have some majority owned but non-wholly owned subs in Australia that both have debt. And so just managing the bank relationships that, we have relationships with here in the US and we have connections with in Australia, the time zone there would really be killer. And that would be, that's definitely a risk that I'd have to work really close with the CFOs to manage, and would likely have to get myself there to be able to manage locally, unless I was just working crazy hours here. So for me in my role, that's I think the biggest risk that I see.
It's sort of painting more of a complete picture here, tying into some of the earlier things you were talking about relationships, communication, escalation, are really risk mitigation strategies here, right? For dealing with some of those, those aspects of your overall operation. TR, yourself, some of the risks that concern you and how you look at those and how you deal with those.
Sure. So, I mean, we are living business continuity plan of 4 years ago, right? We're all remote. I think maybe our business continuity plan is flipped, right? That the base scenario is out, at home, and the continuity plan is to be in the office. So that part is very different. The main risk I start to think about, and this may be kind of a little bit of a weird one, but I think about career risk for the people in my organization who are a bit more junior, right? Because they, and I'm hiring in someone now, and they're going to be remote, and I think about treasury is an odd beast, right? I want my treasury analyst to know. I'm getting an echo. Sorry. I want my treasury analyst to know a lot of different people in the organization, right? Because I want to provide them the opportunity for a career path, at least, right? I can't push them up the hill, but I can at least make sure that there's, not trees and rocks in the way on the way up the hill of their career path. And there's simple things that they are missing, right? I can't take my most junior person, invite them to a meeting with, a VP of finance and, some other area, have the meeting, the junior person maybe have nothing to contribute to the meeting, but there's that opportunity before and after the meeting for conversation and for them to get involved, not only with, the VP, but whoever the VP brings. And all of that with these kind of meetings is sort of still there, but it's very truncated compared to what it is in person, right? And so there are some risks there when you think about it long term. We have a very long tenured treasury team, so I want to make sure that I provide some visibility to people being there a while and what their career is going to be, and that they have those connections in the other areas of the organization that makes a career possible like it used to be. And that's where I'm facing difficulty and challenge in getting them engaged like that, like you are able to in an office environment. But it's challenges, like I said before, it's challenges that have existed when people are all in the same location. But that's I think for Treasury, that's a long-term existential risk, if you will, right? That at some point we need to make sure that the people are there to backfill us, right? When I eventually retire, because I'm not going to do this forever. There's still people there to do Treasury that are, kind of the same mindset and ability we have.
So it makes sense to sort of building up that capacity, building using the building up the farm team and creating that continuity, across teams and over time as well. Very, very important. Ernie, why don't I hand it to you to sort of finish us up on this topic? When you're, with the companies that you help, what are some of the risks that you focus on helping mitigate?
I think this kind of coming back again to the remote hybrid situation is anytime something changes, when a process changes, understanding what the new risk exposures that might emerge, especially on the payment side, the approval side, with your IT folks. How am I connecting to my company's data? Where is that being shared? Counterparty risk. So whenever you change something and a process changes, anything changes, okay, let's figure out what new risks are there, but also I think a lot of people realized that the exposures were more than they thought, right, when they went to their continuity plan. So that's a base. And then anything to do with cybersecurity, obviously, especially with emails now, because a lot more things are going off through emails. Make sure you work with your risk team or whatever. We're being tested. I want to test people. Are you opening emails? How are you sharing information? How are you exchanging information, right? And then they're getting a little bit of different appetite now that we're all moving to also SaaS-based applications, cloud-based applications. So all those, to me, that cybersecurity thing is what hits me. But then just getting back to, we all did the diagrams of the processes. We might need to redo those when we change. And where are the risk exposures? And then how do we help ourselves mitigate those exposures? And how do we involve other departments like IT or maybe whoever, consultants, that we need to understand the risks we have, but what are those emerging risks and changes that we do business along the way. Also with those, they go hand in hand, different types of payments, whatever that might be, business practices. So I think the payments risk really gets to me. Payments risk, compliance risk, regulatory risk, all those things can kind of bubble up for me.
No, appreciate you sort of bringing it back to that, that sort of treasury, operational treasury sort of view as well, Ernie. It's important to keep that in mind. I'm going to hand it back to Jen here in a minute, but I mean, it's been excellent input from you guys. A great conversation in terms of, some of the great themes, I think, around, relationships, flexibility, communication, meeting management, and then to some of Ernie's points around, generally adaptability here as things change and new risks emerge. It's been definitely a learning experience for me as well to hear your perspectives, and I appreciate it. With that, Jim, why don't I hand it back to you?
Sure thing. Thank you, everyone. Those are really fantastic insights. As we're getting up a little bit closer to time, we did have a couple of questions come through. I'm going to pick one from Lisa. So Quinn and Cassie will reach out to you individually after the session. So Lisa asks, it's a bit long. I'm a lone Treasury person in a regional office of a large corp where the full TRE org is in another country. I work pretty autonomously and kind of resist going to the local office every week where I can work more efficiently at home. The team in the office are not working directly with me, and I'm usually on the phone, Teams meetings, online when they're away. How would you approach the management with impressing these facts to them, as working from home allows me to get my work done more efficiently? Any recommendations?
I mean, I'm definitely, I'll jump in here. You know, I think it's explaining just that, you know, please tell me why I need to be in the office, in a nicer way, of course, but you know, what's the benefit of me going into the office? I can tell you the benefit of me not going into the office, but I want to understand what's driving your need for me to be in the office, because it's, you know, I'm not really seeing any team building. I'm not seeing all of these things, and it's more efficient for me to work from home. I save time, you know, really like line up your benefits, but ask them to explain their motivation for asking you to come in.
Connie, TR, Ernie, thank you so much for being in the discussion today. Really appreciate all of the insights that you provided, and really enjoyed speaking with you about this, you know, sort of new normal that we're looking at here, as far as, you know, remote work and nomadic treasury. So I'll say thank you very much, and thanks to everybody who joined the conversation and listened in, and we appreciate it. And happy holidays,